Once upon a tabletop, some adventurers set out on an expedition and welcome a new member to their party. Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan Rutledge, and this is episode 6 of Colonial Cardia Lark's Landing, a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign being played at a local board game cafe called the Devil's Bench. When last we left our heroes, most of them were talking to the racist general store owner, Naldor. Currently, Shend, the Dwarven Ranger, and Kordak, the half-orc fighter, are looking around the shop. Balazar, the Dragonborn Cleric, is standing in the doorway, refusing to enter the shop. While still aboard the noble's Lark, he witnessed Naldor and a group of cronies beating up a half-orc. He isn't in a forgiving mood. Stor, the Goblin Monk, gets up his courage and asks Naldor if he has any loots. The man replies that he doesn't currently have any, but that he might be able to find one. Then Stor surprises his friends by directly asking Naldor about the incident on the ship. Naldor doesn't deny beating up their friend Gorbash and is completely unrepentant. He expresses the opinion that all half-orcs, dragonborn, and tieflings are part of the Cymvidian Empire. They're not to be trusted. Kordak speaks up, pointing out that members of these races have been the first line of defense for the settlement ever since they landed. Naldor admits this is true, but insists that he has no idea what their motivations may be. Stor presses the point, saying that Kordak was part of an army fighting against the Cymvidian Empire. Naldor says so he claims, and why should he trust a goblin? Goblins were fighting for the Cymvidian Empire too, and are known to be evil. Having not been raised by his own race, Stor is surprised to find that his people were fighting for the Empire. Naldor insists that it was true, having seen it with his own eyes when the Empire killed his family. Stor expresses that he's lost family to the Empire as well, but he only gets sarcastic replies from Naldor. Frustrated by the constant racism he's hearing, Balazar casts a spell that makes the ground tremble. At this point, Naldor loses his temper and tells them if they aren't buying anything to get out. The adventurers continue exploring the settlement. They only find one other building of note that they hadn't been aware of before. It's currently the only building in the settlement that has more than one story, and it looks kind of like a cross between a tower and a bamboo hut. It's swaying in the wind and looks like it might topple over at any moment. They decide to investigate. As they come upon the door, they regroup with Gilligan, the human mystic. They knock on the door and hear something break inside. The door is opened by a heavy-set man who looked like he used to be a lot heavier, wearing long robes. The man alternates between stuttering over his words and striking mysterious poses. He introduces himself as Farion the Great. When he's asked how he got the title the Great, he says that he's a great wizard and here is his tower. This doesn't satisfy the adventurers, who keep questioning him. They can't seem to get any straight answers, but eventually decide he's not worth their time and head off. All except Gilligan, who stays behind, telling Farion that he's a spellcaster of a sort as well and would like to chat with him. He suggests tea and pulls out a tea set. Farion says that since the rest of the rabble is gone, he may as well, and takes him inside. Stor catches the word rabble and, offended, hangs back to eavesdrop outside a window. He knows that he should be able to hear what's going on inside, but can't hear a word. He waits anyways to speak with Gilligan when he emerges. Inside, Gilligan engages Farion in conversation, trying to find out more about this wizard. He decides that he's being truthful about being a wizard, but he may be a bit on the bumbling side. At last he gets to the point that he wanted to speak about. He asks Farion for a copy of the Identify spell that he can add to his ritual book. The wizard replies that his only copy is in his spellbook, which he's not willing to part with for very long. Gilligan tries to convince him to make a copy, but Farion insists that he's too busy building his tower. Gilligan asks how much space he needs. He needs enough space for all his belongings. Knowing that everyone here is a refugee who just traveled across the ocean on a ship, Gilligan looks around and says, "What possessions?" Farion considers him for a moment and then shows him the contents of a pouch on his belt. The inside is much larger than the outside, and it's filled with stuff. Filing the existence of this magical object away for later, Gilligan takes his leave. Farion does say that he'll eventually prepare a copy of the Identify spell for Gilligan. He regroups with Stor outside. Meanwhile, the rest of the group head off to find Wyatt's tavern. They find the half-elf and a couple of helpers very slowly constructing a building. They tell him that they're thinking of leaving town for a few days and ask him to keep an eye on their house for them. Wyatt enthusiastically agrees, saying that he'll do so in exchange for stories. They head home. Stor and Gilligan also stop by Wyatt's, having heard that the others were planning to go there. Wyatt tells them that the others have already gone home. Before following, Stor asks Wyatt if he happens to have an extra loot. Unfortunately, Wyatt does not. The two rejoin the others at home. There, they start making plans. They're happy with the current state of the settlement and believe that they can leave for quite some time without any problems. Now that they've found small traces of civilization, they want to head out on a long expedition to see what they can find. They spend the rest of the day making plans and preparing to leave. Gilligan tries to trade some supplies with Naldor, but is unimpressed by the deal he's offered. Aware of their missing druid friend Callan, who they haven't seen since they landed, the adventurers ask the militia if there's anyone who would like to accompany them. Acta, a tiefling warlock with a broken horn, agrees to join them. In the morning, the 6 of them set out. Having explored to the east and southeast before, they decide to travel northeast. They set out into the jungle. Gilligan leaves Pablo, his familiar, behind to watch over camp. Around the middle of the afternoon, they find a patch of limestone with a deep water pool in it. It's remarkably like the one by their settlement, if smaller. Shend investigates it and tastes the water, determining that it's also fresh water. In fact, the taste is so similar to the water by the settlement that he's pretty sure they're connected. He also notices a slight current in the pool, heading in the direction of their settlement. Curious to know more, Gilligan drops his equipment and dives in. Unfortunately, he's not ready for the current and gets pulled under. Shend ties a rope to himself and dives in to save him, but Gilligan, getting a handle of things, decides to start swimming with the current. Gilligan finds himself going through an opening into an underground cave. The world goes completely black and he can't see a thing. Something grabs his leg and he reaches back to find that it's soft and hairy. He gets dragged backwards out into the dim light of the pool. He sees the form that's holding him and punches at it before realizing that it's Shend. The two are pulled back to the surface by Kordak. However, Gilligan has not been deterred. He wants to know more about this, however Shend refuses to go back in. Balthazar casts a spell on a rope, making it light up, then they tie that to Gilligan. He swims back down to investigate the cave. He finds water-shaped passages which branch off and narrow into smaller tunnels. When he determines that he probably can't get any further, he returns to the surface where Shend has been telling the others that he's very uncomfortable in small, tight spaces. Gilligan reports what he found, and Shend says, "I know, it's like the island has veins." They continue journeying for the rest of the day and make camp at night. Shortly into the next morning, the jungle thickens and comes to an end. They find themselves looking out over rolling savanna grasslands. There's a scattering of trees, and they also see a few herds of animals like gazelles and giraffes. They continue on for the day, with the only interesting point being a petrified tree that they stop to examine. The next day of traveling, they don't even find anything as interesting as that. They set watches for the night and go to sleep. However, during the third watch, Shend, their observant ranger, falls asleep in his tree. Just to their luck, that's when trouble strikes. They are all rudely awakened, being pecked at by withered, featherless bird creatures. The ones who have their flesh struck notice the magic in the attacks. Shend and Acta are unable to shake off the effects. They both feel extremely heavy and unable to get up, as if they've started turning to stone. Enraged at her rude awakening, Acta points at the creature who awoke her and blasts it with fire. Everyone begins fighting back. It's an intense battle that only grows fiercer when Shend and Acta turn completely to stone. Their one bit of luck is that Shen's swords seem to have trapped one of the creatures. One by one, each of the enemies falls, leaving only one left. Stor has also started turning to stone, but he manages to shake the magic off. The last creature, noticing it's alone, begins to fly off. A crossbow bolt from Balthazar clips it, and a number of thrown weapons go flying past. Then Gilligan rushes in, flying up above it and crushing it to the ground. He brings it back to camp, examining it closely. He hopes to find a way to bring his companions back from being stone. Suddenly he realizes that he's read about these creatures before. They're known as cockatrices, and the petrification they cause is known to wear off after only 24 hours. He breathes a sigh of relief and snaps its neck. Kordak pulls the Shend statue down from his tree, and then they set a final watch and go to sleep. They spend the next day waiting. Gilligan and Stor both try to extract some venom from the cockatrices, but they fail. The attempt nearly turned Stor to stone as well. That night, Shend and Acta's flesh returned to normal. They woke the entire camp with their battle cries before realizing that the fight was over. Balthazar explains what had happened. Shend becomes furious with himself, thinking he's the world's worst ranger. Since landing, he hasn't landed the killing blow on a single creature. That means he hasn't been able to add to his trophy collection. Worse than that, his tracking skills have had to be supplemented by other party members, the most successful of which was the cleric. Now, to top it all off, he fell asleep on his watch, endangering himself and his friends. And this tiny little bird thing had turned him to stone, essentially killing him. With these thoughts roiling in his mind, he stomps off into the night. Balthazar follows after to make sure he stays out of trouble. Acta volunteers to take the final watch of the night so the others can get their sleep. Some distance from camp, Shend accidentally disturbs a large ostrich-like bird. It raises its head from the ground, opens its axe-like beak, and screeches at him. Shend draws an arrow and throws everything he's got at the outraged bird. His first shot goes straight through its neck and drops it to the ground. With a feral roar, Shend chops off its head to take as a trophy. He's feeling much better now. And that's where this session draws to a close. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and share this series with friends you think might enjoy it. If you want to support the channel, there's a link for that down in the description. You'll also find a link to my website where you can buy the chainmail I make. And that's all for today. Check back in another week to find out what happens next, once upon a tabletop.